Good evening, you're watching the news at 8. I'm Nidhi Razdan and these are the headlines tonight. In a first, the Supreme Court makes public the government's objections on judges' appointments and reiterates their support to the candidates. In one case, the centre objected to the candidate being gay. In another case, it cited an article critical of Prime Minister Modi shared by the candidate as an objection. The top court strongly rejects both arguments. For the second day, India's top wrestlers protests in the heart of Delhi against allegations of sexual harassment in the Wrestling Federation. The Wrestling Federation chief, who's also a BJP MP, however, still remains in his post. The wrestlers demand the Prime Minister's intervention, saying that they're ashamed that this has happened in India. The government strongly condemns a BBC documentary on Prime Minister Modi and the 2002 Gujarat riots, calls it a propaganda piece with a colonial mindset. The UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says he does not agree with the characterization of Mr. Modi in it. The Bharat Jodo Yatra's final leg, Rahul Gandhi enters Jammu and Kashmir, says he's returning to his roots and is there to share the suffering of the people of J&K. The Delhi Women's Commission chief is harassed and dragged by a car in Delhi, ironically, while she was out on the streets for a reality check on the safety of women in the capital. The accused is arrested. And the story that surprised the world, Jacinda Ardern has announced that she will be stepping down as New Zealand's Prime Minister, not seeking re-election. She says, "I simply don't have enough in the tank." She's done. Well, our top story tonight, in a first, the Supreme Court today made public the government's objections to the elevation of senior advocates as High Court judges in the Delhi High Court and one candidate in the Madras High Court. The court also made public its own responses to the centre, where it has strongly backed both the candidates. The first case involves Saurabh Kirpal, who is an openly gay senior advocate, and his appointment as a judge has now been pending for the last 5 years. The government's intelligence agency, the RNAW, cited two reasons to oppose Saurabh Kirpal's elevation: the fact that he is gay and that his partner is a Swiss national. In its response, a letter signed by Chief Justice Chandrachud, Justices S.K. Kaul and Justice K.M. Joseph says the fact that Saurabh Kirpal has been open about his orientation is a matter which goes to his credit. His appointment will provide inclusion and diversity. Also, they point out that his partner is from a friendly nation and that many constitutional functionaries in the country do have partners who are from other countries. In the second case, there was an Intelligence Bureau report which raised objections to the elevation of R. John Satyan in the Madras High Court as a judge because, amongst other things, he had shared an article critical of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The Supreme Court said that this does not impinge on the character or integrity of Mr. Satyan and reiterated its support for his candidature. Well, my colleague Sunil Prabhu now joins us on that big story tonight. And Sunil, of course, this comes in the backdrop of a confrontation between the government and the Supreme Court over the appointment of judges. It's quite something to see the court make this communication public.
That's right, Nidhi, as you rightly pointed out, and be it the Law Minister or the Vice President, there's been to and fro and public speaking about the entire process of appointment of judges. But I think the Supreme Court Collegium today giving a reasoned argument, and the argument earlier has been from the government that we only see the minutes where they say they reiterate a particular position. Here, for the first time, as you point out, there is a complete transparency in the entire reasoning. What are the issues that have been raised, for example, in Saurabh Kirpal's case by the RAW, by the Law Minister, and how they have pointedly responded and signed by all three judges of the Collegium, reiterating that position that they would like Justice Kirpal, despite his sexual orientation, despite having a partner from Switzerland, despite the Law Minister pointing about homosexuality and the possibility of having not a correct opinion in terms of outlook. The Supreme Court Collegium giving a reasoned argument, point to point, on every particular issue, saying that there have been higher constitutional authorities in terms of spouses present as well as past who have been there. They have also argued very effectively that sexual orientation, there's a constitutional court which has given that, and there is no bias, and reiterating the integrity of Saurabh Kirpal. In the other case, as you talked about, the Madras High Court, they've reiterated and made it clear that he should be given precedence before the other Madras High Court judges who have been given for elevation this time round, making it clear that there was a full bench collegium which looked at this entire issue, agreed with this entire his integrity. They do not find anything adverse in the IB's report, even though he posted it saying he's from a Christian background, and reiterating very categorically that they still feel
yes,
that he
I
should
think
be
what's surprising, Sunil, is to many people will be what some of the reasons are, which are often cited by the government and by intelligence agencies as objections. Something like someone's sexual orientation or sharing an article critical of the PM. But very quickly, Sunil, what happens now in terms of procedure? Can the government sit on this reply now from the Supreme Court indefinitely? Or do they have a time frame within which they must send it back, and therefore don't have any choice but to allow the appointments to go ahead?
Well, technically, this is a little bit of a grey area, but recently there was a Supreme Court judgment which gave a timeline that you should do it within 3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. But very rarely do you see a confrontation between the executive and the judiciary. When a reiteration comes the second time, it means that it should be considered. It has to be accepted. That's been the usual precedence. But we never can say until this entire incident, until he's of course formally appointed and the the orders are given. So we'll have to wait till that actually happens. Let's keep our fingers crossed and see that there is no confrontation between the executive and judiciary, because it doesn't augur well for a democratic structure like ours. Till that orders are passed for both Justice Kirpal as well as the other judge, we'll have to wait and watch.
All right, Sunil, summing up the times we live in, I guess, thanks very much for joining us. And in fact, I had interviewed Saurabh Kirpal, who is one of the judges in question here, whose sexual orientation is one of the reasons cited by the intelligence agencies for turning down his judgeship. He spoke to me just last month and actually said that he believed that that was the reason why his appointment was being held up. There's been a lot of scrutiny of the higher judiciary lately, and especially the Supreme Court, and we've seen in recent days a fresh disagreement between the government and the higher judiciary about the appointment of judges. Now, your own appointment as a High Court judge is pending because the centre is sitting on the Supreme Court Collegium's recommendation. How has this wait been for you, and why do you think there's been this long delay?
I think the wait has been taken so long because I have already said this in many other spaces. The reason is my sexuality. I don't think the government necessarily wants to appoint openly gay person to the bench. And that's, of course, not the stated reason. And that is part of the problem with the Collegium system. They don't give reasons as to why they've taken a decision. But that's also then the problem with the government not following the law as is. They don't give reasons as to why they're sitting on certain files. Nidhi, for instance, I am not one of those people who thinks that the Collegium system is a good system. I think there are many flaws with it. It needs to be improved. Maybe the government needs to have some formal role in appointment of the judges, as the NJAC, the earlier constitutional amendment had envisaged. But that was struck down, right? The government cannot be a sore loser and say that what we thought was right, and which I agree with the government was probably right, is not the law anymore. And just because you don't think the current procedure is correct, doesn't mean you don't follow it, right? You may disagree with what the Collegium system is, but that is the law of the land, and you have to follow it, good, bad, indifferent. Because not to follow it means you are not obeying the constitutional mandate as interpreted by the Supreme Court. If you think that judgment is wrong, they must ask for a review of that judgment, which they haven't. It has been 4 years since that judgment was passed, striking down the NJAC, but it has not been questioned. So till that is done, the way every citizen of the country obeys the law, I think the government is also bound by the same judgment and the Collegium system.
Meanwhile, the other big story today, India's top Olympian wrestlers were on a protest for the second day today in the national capital, where they are basically demanding accountability for sexual harassment that they say has happened over the years in the Wrestling Federation of the country. The wrestlers have said that they will file an actual complaint if action is not taken very soon. Meanwhile, Sports Minister Anurag Thakur has also spoken on this just now, saying that he will order a speedy probe.
28 hours and counting. India's ace wrestling champions on the streets of the national capital, undeterred in their agitation against the chief of the country's top wrestling body. Now accused of sexually assaulting nearly 30 women wrestlers, this is Brijbhushan Sharan Singh, 6-time BJP MP and President of the Wrestling Federation of India.
उनको पहले इस्तीफा तो दिलवाया जाए, रेसलिंग फेडरेशन को भंग किया जाए, गवर्नमेंट के अंडर में दिया जाए। रेसलिंग फेडरेशन हम नहीं चाहते कि कोई भी अध्यक्ष बने, अभी मत बनाओ आप किसी को भी, लेकिन सरकार अपने अंडर में ले। हमें सरकार पे पूरा भरोसा है, लेकिन हम एक दिन भी कुश्ती नहीं लड़ेंगे रेसलिंग प्रेसिडेंट के अंडर में या उनके गुर्गों के अंडर में।
A group of protesting wrestlers went to the sports ministry today with their demand to suspend the federation and sack the chief, who has been at the helm of the body for over a decade.
केरला से लड़कियों के फोन आ रहे हैं, महाराष्ट्र से लड़कियों के फोन आ रहे हैं, वो खुद पीड़िता रही हैं, उनके साथ वो खुद शोषण का शिकार रही हैं, तो आप समझ सकते हो कि हर स्टेट में फैले हुए हैं। तो हम चाहते हैं कि पूरी रेसलिंग फेडरेशन भंग हो और जितनी भी स्टेट्स हैं वहां भी सबकी फेडरेशन मतलब रेसलिंग फेडरेशन जो है वो भंग होनी चाहिए, एक नई शुरुआत होनी चाहिए, एक फ्रेश स्टार्ट होनी चाहिए।
As per the National Sports Development Code, a set of laws governing Indian sports bodies, federations with reported irregularities are to be suspended till the time a probe is on. In this case, the federation chief is not only accused of sexual harassment on multiple occasions, but also rampant corruption and exploitation of coaches and athletes. But so far, no action against the federation and its boss. Questions are now being raised on the government's inaction given the political links of the accused.
जो भी आरोप लगाए गए हैं बिल्कुल निराधार है। अगर इस प्रकार से शिकायत मेरे खिलाफ थी या इस प्रकार से शिकायत हमारे किसी कोच के थी तो इनको पहले आना चाहिए था और अच्छा होता कि ये नाम लेकर के भी आते कि किस खिलाड़ी के साथ चीफ कोच ने बदसलूकी की है या किस कोच के साथ ब्रिजभूषण सिंह ने बदसलूकी की है या किस कोच के साथ फेडरेशन बदसलूकी की है।
As they take on the power structure, wrestlers say they don't want to reveal the identities of young victims whose careers are at stake.
जो बोल रहे थे कि कोई सामने आ जाए तो मैं फांसी पे लटक जाऊंगा, जो अध्यक्ष जी ने हमारे ने एक बयान दिया था, पहले तो 1-2 लड़कियां थी, अब हमारे साथ 5 से 6 लड़कियां हैं विद प्रूफ है। तो ऐसी चीज नहीं कि हम झूठ बोल रहे हैं या कोई ऐसा ही, अगर सुनवाई नहीं होगी तो हम पुलिस का सहारा भी लेंगे, केस का सहारा भी लेंगे।
Close to 200 young wrestlers, families of athletes and cops from across North India joined this absolutely unprecedented uprising in the national capital. Wrestlers say that this is a tipping point after years of exploitation and abuse. Well, the Sports Ministry has given the Wrestling Federation of India time till Saturday to respond. It remains to be seen what actually comes out of this incredible showdown by wrestlers who have represented the country at prestigious national and international platforms. In New Delhi with camera person Prem Singh and Sushil Rathi, Vedant for NDTV.
मैं तो यही कहूँगा, खिलाड़ियों ने जो आरोप लगाए वो गंभीर किस्म के हैं और उसका संज्ञान लेते हुए भारत सरकार ने, खेल मंत्रालय ने तुरंत कार्रवाई करते हुए रेसलिंग फेडरेशन ऑफ इंडिया को नोटिस भी दिया, 72 घंटे के अंदर जवाब भी मांगा है और इसके अलावा जो कैंप लगना था उसको भी पोस्टपोन कर दिया गया है प्रभावी रूप से। और हम सदा खिलाड़ियों से पहले भी मिलते रहे और आज भी मेरा प्रयास है कि मैं वापस आकर खिलाड़ियों से मिलूंगा ताकि उनकी बात को सुन भी सके और जो उचित कार्रवाई होगी वो भी करेंगे।
In other big news today, the government has strongly condemned a BBC documentary on Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the 2002 Gujarat riots, calling it a propaganda piece designed to push a discredited narrative, which they said shouldn't be dignified with a response, but then did go on to respond. The BBC series goes into the 2002 riots and Mr. Modi's alleged role.
Let me just make it very clear. We think this is a propaganda piece designed to push a particular discredited narrative. The bias, a lack of objectivity, and frankly a continuing colonial mindset is blatantly visible. If anything, this film or documentary is a reflection on the agency and individuals that are peddling this narrative again. It makes us wonder whether about the purpose of this exercise and the agenda behind it. And frankly, we do not wish to dignify such efforts.
Meanwhile, defending Prime Minister Modi in the British Parliament, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak distanced himself from the BBC piece, saying that he doesn't agree with the characterization of his Indian counterpart. Mr. Sunak made the remarks as the documentary was raised in the British Parliament by a Pakistani origin Member of Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, last night the BBC revealed the Foreign Office knew the extent of Narendra Modi's involvement in the Gujarat massacre that paved the way for the persecution of Muslims and other minorities we see in India today.
Mr. Speaker, the UK government's position on this has been clear and long-standing and hasn't changed. Of course, we don't tolerate persecution where it appears anywhere, but I'm not sure I agree at all with the characterisation that the honourable gentleman has put forward.
Well, my colleague Maha Siddiqui has more on what has become quite a big story. And, Maha, I don't think that this BBC documentary is available to see here in India. But the MEA's response is quite strong, despite saying that they didn't feel it dignified a response.
Yes, absolutely. And this documentary, you're correct, cannot be viewed in India, and that's something that Arindam Bagchi, the Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson, also pointed out. But however, several questions were asked to him today at the regular press briefing of the Ministry of External Affairs to this documentary, which is called India, the Modi Question. It's not available for viewing in India, but the description of the documentary says that it looks and investigates whether the present Prime Minister Modi played a role in the 2002 Gujarat riots when he was the Chief Minister. Now, the Ministry of External Affairs, of course, has strongly condemned, as we've already pointed out, this documentary, calling it a piece of propaganda, also saying that it reflects a colonial mindset. On the other hand, we've seen that questions were raised about this even in the British Parliament. This question came in from a Pakistan origin Member of Parliament in the UK Parliament yesterday, and Rishi Sunak said that he doesn't agree with the characterization. Now, he did not specify whether this characterization was meant in terms of what the MP said with regards to Prime Minister Modi, or the fact that the riots were aimed at ethnic cleansing, genocide. He left it at that, saying that though the UK stands against any sort of persecution, he doesn't agree with this characterization. Nidhi.
Right, Maha Siddiqui, thanks very much for that update. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister was in two important states today, Karnataka and Maharashtra. Karnataka, of course, will see elections in just a few months from now. And both states have also been warring with each other lately over a border issue. The Prime Minister, while speaking in Karnataka, was talking about standing for development and reaching out to the poorest of the poor.
आजादी के अनेक दशकों बाद एक बहुत बड़ी आबादी ऐसी थी जो विकास से वंचित थी, सरकारी मदद के दायरे से बाहर थी। देश में जिन्होंने लंबे समय तक शासन किया, उन्होंने ऐसे साथियों का सिर्फ नारे देकर वोट तो ले लिया, लेकिन उनके लिए ठोस फैसले नहीं किए।
Meanwhile, Rahul Gandhi's Bharat Jodo Yatra has finally entered Jammu and Kashmir. This is the last leg of the Yatra, where it will be now for the next 10 days or so. That will culminate in Srinagar on the 30th of January. These are the pictures when they crossed over from Punjab into Lakhanpur at the border, and Rahul Gandhi there leading the Bharat Jodo Yatra. He spoke when they did cross over, saying that he was going back to his roots and had come to understand the suffering, as he put it, of the people of J&K.
जिस धरती से मेरा परिवार आया, उस धरती की ओर मैं वापस पैदल जा रहा हूं। मैं जानता हूं कि जम्मू कश्मीर के लोगों ने कितना दुख सहा है, मैं समझता हूं, और सबको चोट लगी है, सबने दुख सहा है, सबने दुख देखा है, और मैं सर झुकाकर आपकी जमीन में आया हूं.
My colleague Nazir Masoodi now joins us for more on that. Nazir, of course, there are security concerns with the Yatra passing through J&K, which is one part of it. But politically, what was the response to it on the ground as he crossed over?
Well, Nidhi, it was a grand reception of Rahul Gandhi at Madhopur as he enters Jammu and Kashmir to start the last leg of Bharat Jodo Yatra, which will culminate on 30th of this month in Srinagar with what Congress says the grand rally when Rahul Gandhi will hoist the national flag in Srinagar, and there would be entire Congress leadership and many leaders of the opposition parties from across the country. And as he reached the Jammu and Kashmir border, Lakhanpur and Madhopur, he addressed people. He tried to strike a chord with the people and say his ancestors have come from Kashmir and he's coming back to his roots, walking, and he say he knows the sufferings of the people, their pain, their sufferings, and he has come here to share that pain. And because we have seen earlier, Congress leaders talked about what people are going through after the abrogation of 370 and state was, divided into two union territories, how people suffer. Farooq Abdullah also made a very, very passionate and emotional speech. And after he completed his speech, Rahul Gandhi hugged him. So now after that speech, Ria Yatra starts from tomorrow. There are two concerns. One is the concern of the security, which always remains in Jammu and Kashmir. And other is the bigger concern, which is the weather. When Yatra reaches Banihal Tunnel and it crosses the Banihal Tunnel, then there's sub-zero temperature. We have to see, will Rahul Gandhi continue to wear that T-shirt, or he has to wear woolens like me and the jacket. But right now he is retreating inside this camp after entering in the valley. So interesting days here, and Rahul Gandhi, as he said, that for next 9 and 10 days he's going to meet his own people. He has come here, bow his head before the people because he understands their pain and will share that pain with them in next 9 and 10 days.
All right, Nazir, thanks very much for that update. Meanwhile, Swati Maliwal, the chief of the Delhi Commission for Women, was accosted on the road in the national capital and dragged by a drunk driver for nearly 15 meters in the early hours of the day today. The man has been arrested now. In fact, ironically, Ms. Maliwal was out on the streets in the middle of the night doing a reality check on just how the streets were safe for women in the capital. And by the way, this happened right outside the All India Institute of Medical Sciences.
We keep doing inspections, and this inspection was very different because generally we inspect dark spots, we inspect PCR vehicles, we inspect pickets, police pickets. But this time I just decided that let me stand alone on the streets of Delhi, on the main road of Delhi rather, arterial road of Delhi, and just let me understand what does a woman have to go through in this city when she's all alone. It happened with me, it will happen with any other woman. I can guarantee you there were other people in my team, and I realized that even they were being similar incidents happened with them. And I think any Delhi girl can tell that this is a very common thing. If you get caught, right, in the midst of any Delhi road beyond a particular hour, then things will happen to you which are really, really horrible.
Well, Jacinda Ardern has announced that she'll be stepping down as New Zealand's Prime Minister next month. She will not be seeking re-election. This comes at a time when her government's ratings were also falling. But Ardern said that she simply can't be Prime Minister for another 4 years. She just doesn't have enough in the tank, as she put it.
We give all that we can for as long as we can, and then it's time. And for me, it's time.
An announcement that took the world by surprise. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern resigning from the top job, saying she didn't have enough in the tank to continue. She will step down as Prime Minister by the 7th of February.
I'm not leaving because it was hard. Had that been the case, I probably would have departed 2 months into the job.
Over the last 5 years, Ardern was a much celebrated leader, the youngest woman Prime Minister ever at the age of 37, She continued to be a trailblazer for women in leadership positions, becoming only the second woman head of government to have a baby while in office. Ardern carried her then 3-month-old daughter inside the hall of the UN General Assembly, the first such appearance by a baby in the organization's history. Ardern also won widespread praise for her response to the March 2019 Christchurch attacks. She was also lauded by many for her handling of the COVID pandemic.
I'm entering now my 6th year in office, and for each of these years I have given my absolute all. I believe that leading a country is the most privileged job anyone could ever have, but also one of the more challenging. You cannot and should not do it unless you have a full tank, plus a bit in reserve for those unexpected challenges.
For almost a year, her party has polled behind the centre-right National Party. Local sentiment towards the government has soured as their country emerges from a long period of pandemic isolation. New Zealand is also grappling with inflation, rising interest rates and housing affordability issues. It's also facing localized problems such as a string of raids and robberies that have led to perceptions among some voters that Ardern's administration is soft on crime. While internationally Jacinda Ardern's star power has endured, at home her fall in popularity has been steady. Even though polling over recent months has placed the Ardern-led Labour Party slightly behind the opposition, the National Party, Ardern says her decline in the polls is not behind the decision to leave. Parmeshwar Bawa for NDTV.